Welcome to the Valmika Property Investing Podcast. I'm JP, your host and the founder of Valmika Buyers Agency. With my background in investment banking, I'm here to share Wall Street tips and secrets for building a top 4% property portfolio. Let's dive into the world of property investment together. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Valmika Property Investing Podcast. This week I'm going to speak on something that is quite interesting, and it's quite a few people have asked me this. And the title of the episode is going to be called Wall Street Tips and Tricks and How to Save Up to Buy a Property. So what have people been asking me? They say, JP, property is so expensive, especially in Sydney and Australia. How do we ever save up to be able to afford to buy a property? And you'll never believe what the answer to that is. The answer to that is, if you want to purchase a property, or if you want to save to purchase a property, the best way to save is to buy a property. But that doesn't make sense, right? We need the money first to purchase a property, and that's exactly it. So I'm going to talk to you about this topic and how we do it. So we're going to separate it into 4 different sections. First, I'm going to talk about why cash isn't king. Most people think, you need to save up in the form of cash to be able to purchase a property. I'm going to show you why and prove to you why this is not something that you should think about doing in order to purchase a property. But I'll get into that in more detail. Then I'm going to speak about using property to save instead of cash. Thirdly, I'm going to speak about using property to pay off your primary place of residence faster. So accelerating net worth with property. And then fourthly, I'm going to speak about saving for other expenses using property. All right, so first topic, why is cash not king? The biggest destruction of wealth, other than depreciating assets such as cars and boats, etc., is actually cash. And why do I say that? When you keep your money in the form of cash in a bank account or savings account, for example, firstly, that savings account is going to be heavily taxed. So it's going to be at your current income tax rate. So for most of you, it'll be almost half of it goes to tax. Secondly, you don't get a very high interest rate. So it's not going to be anywhere near the rate that you would pay on debt, for example, on a property. And it's also going to be less than inflation. So what that actually does is keeping your money in cash every year, the value of that cash gets less and less because of the effect of inflation. So inflation is the biggest eroder of cash. So it does not make sense to save up for a property using cash. Obviously, there has to be a cash component to it, but I'll explain to you now how to use property in order to save for a property. How do you do that? So let's say, for example, you're looking to purchase a home in an expensive part of Australia, for example, like Sydney. But the median house price in Sydney at the moment is around $1 million, but you'll need like 20% or close to that in order to get a loan in order to pay it. And that's going to be $200,000. But that takes a long time to save up to get that $200,000. And by the time you saved up for it, the median price has actually moved up more and you're falling behind. You keep falling behind the curve. The answer to that is, if you want to save up to purchase a property in Sydney, then purchase a property in a cheaper jurisdiction with good growth, like in Queensland or Perth, for example. So you can pick up a property for half the price in a good growth area, and you only need to put in, say, $50,000 to $100,000 deposit instead of $200,000. And then you are keeping up with the trend because that property will be growing faster than inflation. You'll be using debt to grow off a base of $500,000 instead of a base of $50,000. And your growth will accelerate with it. So what will happen is you're able to save at a much faster pace by using that property. And then once you reach a certain level, you can sell that property to purchase your home, and you'll have more than enough deposit for a home in Sydney, for example. But what if you don't have the $50,000, for example, to purchase that home in Queensland? Well, there's other options. So you can find commercial property. And let's say, for example, oh yeah, but I can't afford to buy a small strip mall, or it's not what I'm saying. There are industrial units, for example, and industrial units yielding much higher than inflation and much higher than your debt yield, for example. So let's say, for example, you get a storage unit for $100,000 and it's yielding 9%. You can gear that to a very high gearing ratio because it's got such a good positive cash flow. You could get almost 90% gearing. So that means you only have to pay 10% down, which is $10,000. Then your asset is growing at a $100,000 level at 9% per annum. And the majority of the capital used to acquire that asset you get from a bank loan, which is only costing you, say, 6 or 7%. So you have a 2% difference in the growth according to what it's costing you. So your wealth accelerator in that is gaining at a much faster pace than keeping your cash in a savings deposit that is getting taxed almost 50% and is lower than inflation and is eroding every year. Is it making sense? Not only can you use this method to save up to purchase another property your dream home, for example, but you can use it if you've got, let's say, for example, you've already got a primary place of residence that you have purchased. But you don't want to be spending the rest of your life paying off a 30-year loan. So how do you pay it down in, say, 6 or 7 years? The answer to that is acquiring another property. Use the equity in your primary residence together with a little bit of more cash for the deposit to purchase another property. That property, if you purchase in the right area, will be growing at a great rate. So not only are you getting the yield from the rental yield in it, but you're getting the capital growth on top of it, and you're growing off a much higher base because you're using debt in that second property. So your amount of wealth that you use to generate from that new property allows you to get the capital in 6-7 years time to be able to pay off. So you sell that house, that investment property, and you sell that and you use that capital to pay off your primary residence. Simple, right? It is something that is in your face, but not many people realize it. Using property is an exceptionally great way of getting your wealth acceleration going. So do not underestimate the power and the wealth generation that property can give you. And it's all got to do with good debt. The gearing that you can get on the back of that property is what accelerates your wealth. And why do I say it accelerates your wealth? Is because it's like having a partner in the bank who only expects a 6% interest rate return on the majority of the money he's giving you or they're giving you in order to purchase a property. So you not only are you growing off a much higher base, but you're going off a much higher base much quicker because it's that cheap partners are only requiring 6% off it. So you can also use property to save for other expenses. So there was a couple that approached me and said, they've got their kids and they want to send them to a private school for high school when they get there. But how are they going to be able to afford it when they get there? So I said to them, purchase an investment property, whether it's in form of commercial property or a residential property. That's the best way to be able to generate that wealth to be used at a later stage. You can then sell the property or use the rental income from it to substitute for the income you need in order to pay for your child's private school education or to go to university overseas at a later stage. It's a very smart way of doing it. And it's in your face and people don't realize it. So we're very lucky to be in a safe haven asset country that has got demand from international investors, has got a large immigration with wealthy people coming in, and they need a place to stay. And as a result, the property in Australia is actually a financial instrument. So use it and treat it like a financial instrument to grow your wealth. Moving on to the auction clearance results for the week ending 3rd of December 2023. New South Wales, a great strong showing, no drop from the previous weeks, still clearing at 67%, with Sydney clearing at 68.5%. Still a shortage of property in the market. So I wouldn't say the demand is strong, but because it's such the supply is such an issue, it creates that higher demand dynamic because of such a supply shortage. Queensland clearing at 67.5%, with Brisbane clearing at a very strong 76%. Victoria clearing at 64.3%, with Melbourne at 64.6%. Western Australia had a massive uptick last week, but that was purely because their dynamics are different. Not as many homes go to auction in Western Australia and Perth as the other states, so it is a bit volatile. So 16% down in the week on Western Australia with a 58.8% clearance rate, and Perth clearing at 46% with a 31% drop. Volatile numbers, as I mentioned, because of them having a different dynamic and not utilizing auctions as often and as much as other states do. So it is a volatile number. South Australia is still clearing, having the strongest clearance rates out of all the states, with 77.5% in South Australia, and Adelaide clearing at 77.36%. ACT clearing at 55.1%, 8% up from a week ago, with Canberra also clearing at that 55.1%. I hope you found this episode valuable. If you need me to go into more detail on any of the topics I discussed, please drop me a note and I'll gladly do so. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Valmika Property Investing Podcast. If you're interested in our services, please visit us at valmikaproperty.com. Remember, the content shared in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. For personalized financial advice, always consult your trusted financial advisor or professional. See you in the next episode.